Yes, okay, so thank you again for that, that nice introduction. Thank you again for having me back in your wonderful space here at the Theosophical Society in Maryland. And again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Robert Randle, and I have now for about a year or some change been giving a handful of classes here, lectures and such here at the Theosophical Society on the topic of magic, magic with a K being the science and art of causing change to occur in accordance with will, which is a really fancy way of talking about what I think pretty much every spiritual practice in one form or another has attempted to articulate. And we've had some great times in the previous classes, and now hopefully we can stack all of what we've learned into today's lessons, which is basically like how to actually put a spell or a ritual together. Like, how do we do it, and what should we be thinking about? What is the sort of checklist to go into? And I've put together that for you guys today. So everybody should have a packet of information, and also if you ever need to go back and look for it later, I will have all of this, of course, on my website, therelcom.com, which I know Anne has the links on her site and stuff.
And I'll post it on Facebook.
Right, excellent. So that's all fine, but I think everybody has this, or you guys can share. For the most part, this is just what I'm going to be going over today, as well as a couple of handouts that you might find useful down the line when you decide to do your own spell work, and they are just useful resources that I have that you might find useful as well. So I suppose how to begin, where to begin. The formula of ritual. So really we could think about this really in 4 stages, right? There's the first stage, which is our prep work, and then the other 3 stages are basically the stages of the actual ritual, being opening, sort of the spell work itself, the actual meat of the ritual, and then closing, which is essentially the same thing as opening. It's just you do it at the end. So you open and close in those respects, and we'll go through that as we go through this. So the first thing to think about when it comes to doing spell work, whatever that is to first make sure that you have permission to do what it is that you're hoping to do. So if, like, for instance, you're doing work with yourself, no big deal, you give yourself permission, but if you were to be doing work with other people, or more specifically on another person, say healing work or the like, you always want to have that person's permission first before you are attempting to do any kind of change with them in their lives. That's just common courtesy, and also consent and contract is a big part of what we do and why it works. And so we always want to make sure that we are giving permission before we would allow spirit to work through us. That seems only fair. And so basically, by extension, then we could say that, especially when we're doing group work, permission to enter someone else's sacred space is also sort of part of that. And so you can even ritualize that if you're doing a group work, basically, invitation into your temple space, whatever you set up. Or, like, for instance, if we were doing a ritual here, we would open the Theosophical Lodge, that kind of thing. But that's basically, first you want to make sure that you have permission to do what you are attempting to do before you even start, right? That's just fair. So then the next thing to think about is planning for the actual ritual, choosing the day and choosing the time, as well as choosing what you may want to be thinking about going into your process. So, for instance, in your handout, I have a very handy thing, and again, you can also find on my website. We talked about this in a previous class, but these are the planetary days and the planetary hours.
Not everybody has that.
Right. Oh, okay, that's fine. We'll make sure that you can have this later on too. But basically, this is just a chart to help you figure out what planets are basically ruling which of the days and then which of the hours. And so this would help you, once you understand the planets and their words, as well as the zodiac and their words, which is, again, other handouts that are also in your sheet, that would help you to piece together when and how where to perform your ritual, where it will be most advantageous. So, like, just as a for instance, today is Sunday. So it is the day, of the sun. So today is the ideal day to do solar work. Any type of solar work would ideally be performed on Sunday. And then if you were wanting to double down on that, then you would maybe do solar work during the hour of the sun on a Sunday, so that you're basically double dipping. Does that make sense? But then there are other ways that you can think about that. Like just as a, let's see, as my, for instance, here, you know, if you were wanting to do...
We couldn't copy the color, but it's on his website.
Yeah, no, not a problem. And I can actually, you can take this too if you want. You can take the one I have.
For now,
because I don't need to take it home. So you can have
share.
this before I leave. But, you know, if you were wanting to do communication work, for instance, you might choose an hour related to Mercury. Because Mercury is all about communication, stuff like that. Once you understand this stuff a little better, it sort of will make sense when and how you will want to perform your rituals. Okay.
Just, pardon me, just to be clear, the left-hand side is the morning hours?
Yes, right. Okay, so I know we talked about this in a previous class, but basically just so you guys know, the way that it works is you take, there are apps that will do this for you. I have one because doing these calculations is a big pain in the ass. But essentially what happens is you take the daylight hours of the day and you divide that by 12, and then that becomes how long the hour is. And then you take the nighttime hours and you do the same thing, divide it by 12 and that. So like for instance, we are really, really close to the winter solstice, so our daylight hours are short. It's more like 40 some minutes, you know, or whatever. Then it adds up, and then, you know, in the summer it's the opposite. So really only on the equinoxes is that equal. Is it like an hour, 12 and 12, that kind of thing. And then everything else is a variation or a slant of that. Okay, so other things to think about while you are preparing your ritual, and we're still in the preparation phase, right? But we want to think about perhaps doing a divination, whatever foci you use. Tarot, I like tarot, you know, anything that would give you insight or your higher self or your intuition or whatever, a clue or insight into the operation that you were about to perform, or perhaps some pitfalls that you might not have thought about. Basically, it's all, or whether it's even a good idea in the first place. Should I even be doing this? Because you might get some totally different insight, and then you'll go in a whole different direction. And we saved ourselves a whole bunch of, you know, spinning our wheels, going in the wrong direction. We want to know what we're doing as we go forward, and that's and again. And so sort of as an example of what you can kind of do, and I would like to credit a good magician friend of mine, Wimser Madavan, Wimser.com. He's the one who turned me on to this in the first place. He figured out that if you put tarot cards down in different configurations, the energetic correspondences create essentially like a vortex of that energy. So what he could do is he would set up, and that's what I did here today. I set up essentially what is the zodiac wheel, and then where the planets are today in the zodiac. And that's where the cards line up. And so that has basically created the altar that we'll use for today's ritual. Does that make sense? And so now we are in tune with today, right now. Does that make sense? That's a way that you can think about it, and just another way that we can stack our correspondences, like we were talking, right? But assuming that it's all, and maybe that's getting a little ahead of ourselves, because we won't set that up until we know the day that we're doing it. And actually, I set it up just today, so that might be a little getting ahead of ourselves. But essentially, once we know what we're doing, it's time to really drill down to the core of the spell, and that would be what we would call our statement of intent. Okay, statement of intent is basically the way that we summarize the operation that we want to achieve. All right, so like as a for instance, it is my will to achieve thus. And then we also want to include in our statement of intent what is often referred to as binding down the action not wanted. Essentially what we want to do is we want to make sure that our spell work causes no harm. So causing harm to none is a really good way to finalize your statement of intent. Because if we don't care, our subconscious doesn't our subconscious mind, our higher self, they work through the path of least resistance. And so whatever will get the result most efficiently is likely the way that it will manifest, which may not necessarily be one, the way that you expected, or two, a way that might be considered karmically sound. You might end up paying for that down the line. You know what I mean? That kind of thing is a way to think about it. So we want to bind down the actions not wanted, which is why we spend a lot of time constructing our statement of intent. And it is an art form in and of itself, because there are all kinds of ways, and I know we talked about this in a previous class too, but there are all kinds of ways that you can trip yourself up with a statement of intent, particularly if you are using negative phraseology and stuff like that. But for instance, it is usually good to be very concise. The more concise, the better. Usually no more than 2 or 3 parameters, so that you can give it form without making it overly complicated. Because the more complex, for instance, if you create a statement of intent that is functionally impossible to manifest, then it won't, because it can't, right? So we want to be, and also this is why we lean so heavily on spirit and lean so heavily on divination, because we don't, as 3-dimensional people, stuck on the arrow of time, we can't see the cause and effect until it's happened in the moment for us. And so that's why spirit is such a great guide, because they already know what would manifest. And it's more about you bringing about, or vibrating in a sense, into the outcome in the future, because it's all now anyway, isn't that? That's the illusion, right? Past and future is an illusion. It's all now, right? So it's happening now. We've already achieved it, and magic is just a formality. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so anyway, so that was the statement of intent, and we will use that as the basis for other things as we go forward. You can quite literally just write out a statement of intent. People will do it on brown paper because that's Earth, and even use lead because that's Saturn, like graphite or lead, so it's a binding sort of operation. But in essence, you can just write your statement of intent out and put it under your candle, or we can take it to the next stage. Which is we can then sigilize that statement of intent, and we can turn it into a symbol that hopefully our conscious mind stops recognizing, and it's our unconscious mind that responds to. And we talked about sigils in a previous class too, and there are 2 schools of thought. So the basic idea is there's the sigil that you do not recognize at all. Your conscious mind has no idea what it means, but your unconscious mind remembers because you made it all that, however long ago it was. Or there's the one that's basically almost like the nagging sigil, the one that you are constantly reminded of, almost in the "are we there yet? Are we there yet?" kind of way, until your unconscious mind is finally like, "Fine, I'll manifest it for you." But that's difficult because every time your conscious mind is working on something, your unconscious mind can't, and so you're basically squirreling up the work the more you're thinking of it. That's why we talk about lust for result being a magic killer. And the idea that we want to set it and forget it, move on, leave it behind us, because it's when we are unattached to it, we no longer care about the outcome, is when it can manifest. And most likely when it will, when we least expected it, right? And we talked about that stuff too. Okay, so again, and then we can even take that a step further beyond a sigil. We can then take that sigil and carve it into a candle, for instance. We're just doubling down again and again and again. But regardless, whatever it is that you're making, whether you're making a sigil, a candle, or an actual tool, something that isn't designed to be destroyed, isn't designed to be charged and then released, right? We'll talk about this in a little bit. But the idea of, like, for instance, an amulet or a talisman. An amulet being something that rejects things, pushes them away, and a talisman being something that draws to you. Otherwise, they're functionally the same thing. But that would be a permanent thing that you would like charge, and in theory recharge occasionally, depending on the object and the operation and that kind of stuff. But I mean, we all have one, whether we know it or not. Everybody's got something that operates this way. It's just when we do it on purpose, it becomes that much more effective. But regardless, everything that we're doing in this preparation phase is a form of pre-charging. we could think about it. It's all the work we're putting in beforehand. And again, it is all a formality, but the more work we do, the more energy we give it, the more we're going to get returned, right? That just makes sense, right? You're going to get out what you put in, right? And the universe gives us what we desire. What we focus on is what manifests, and what we focus on the most is what manifests the most, which is why that may seem like a complete paradox, because chances are we focus on something and then we focus on its opposite for the other half of the day, and it ends up squirreling the entire process up. So that's why we practice this sort of set it and forget it, and this, this unattachment sort of approach, right? And the easiest way to do that is just distract yourself, move on to something new, But regardless, okay, so we talked about that, right? So you could take a sigil, you could go to a candle, or you could make something permanent, like a magic object, a tool, weapon, what have you. But for our purposes, we're talking about something that's designed to be destroyed at the end of, that's the most common, right? Sigil and candle magic. And there's all kinds of stuff online that you can find. So I'm not going to go into much of that today. But the idea is that we are, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but the idea that we are charging this object, this malleable object that is almost designed to hold that charge, like something malleable like wax, right, is designed to hold that charge. And then once it's destroyed, once it's burned down, there's nowhere for that energy to go, so it gets released into the astral, and it has to complete the circuit, right? And that's where it manifests. That's how it manifests. And then you can think about it. The more of the charge, the higher the vibration, the more work you put into it, is the louder the bang, right? When it's released. Doesn't that make sense? Right? Okay, cool. So so now we're going a little bit more into the last of our prep work. Once we know what we're doing and how, and we've selected our candle. Now that's another thing we should probably talk about a little bit is, the knowing your correspondences. And these charts will help you. But again, selecting a color is another good way to, today is Sunday, right? So doing solar work, I chose a white candle, nice and simple, right? White corresponding to the sun. White and yellow or gold all correspond to the sun. Or white just corresponds to spirit, right? Which is just nice and easy, right? Because it's all spirit, right? We're the fractal stuff down here. It's all spirit up there, right? But anyway, so we're excuse me. So we're talking about preparing our actual space. Now, wherever it is that you're going to be doing your operations, ideally you have some kind of temple, but not all of us have a temple. Some of us just have either a shelf or a table, or even something that we can set up and break down that's just dedicated simply to that space. You can dedicate at least a portion of your house to just doing spiritual work, then it becomes a temple. That's what makes it sacred, is how it's treated, how you treat it, right? But regardless, we talked a little bit about using the tarot cards to, charge your altar. This is my portable altar for doing, guest talks and stuff. But regardless of, we're preparing the temple space, but we also want to prepare what offerings we might be making. And that would be on top of, say we're doing candle magic, right? We're going to be activating a candle. That's not the offering, that's the operation. If we still might want to light some incense or burn candles just as offering to spirit. And ideally, also we light a candle because fire, the element of fire, has 1 foot in spirit already. It is a bridge. Water is too, but fire is more, right? Water's more here than there, and fire's more there than here. I think about it that way anyway, right? Has 1 foot in the other realm anyway, so it's kind of like a gateway already to spirit, and it is a great foci, if nothing else, for when you're trancing during your charging and what have you. As flame is a good thing to become hypnotized by. Other things that you can consider doing after you've selected your offerings. There's other forms of offerings as well. you know, there's definitely traditions that say the spirits like alcohol, spirits like tobacco, spirits like fruit. All of those things are offerings that you could make. But again, just even prayer, poetry, something artistic that you have created for the purpose of ritual, those are also offerings. They all praise the Creator in one form or another. By making art, I think when we make beauty, we manifest God in one form or another. But okay, so moving on, you might want to think about after you prepare your temple, how you're going to prepare yourself. You might consider taking a ritual bath, for instance, and there's stuff you can look online, or you know, even just bathing with a satchel of hyssop or whatever. There's stuff like that. There's also some psalms that are traditional to say for purification. But regardless, this is just, you know, where you're you want to cleanse yourself, right? You cleanse whatever negativity might be clinging to you, so that you can go into your ritual fresh, clean, new, what have you. And then, of course, another step to that, on top of all this other stuff, is the idea of using tools, and one of those could actually be a robe. I'm not robing up today. I'm not going to do that today, but if that's another way that you can like double down, and it's even another way of telling your higher self, like, I'm serious about this. I don't put on this robe unless I'm serious, right? We mean this one, right? We're doing it. And it's all because the unconscious mind, while that sounds so simple, right? That's what impresses the unconscious mind. The conscious mind is the one that's impressed by complexity. It's the simplicity of like, oh, I have a magic robe on, now I'm doing magic, is the essence of that sort of unconscious thinking, right? It's almost childish in a sense, but I think just simplified is an easier way to think about it. And then finally, you might say, when it comes to the actual act of charging, because when you are meditating or trancing or whatever, it's very difficult, and in a sense you should not be trying to keep track of time. It's good to have some kind of timekeeper set up for you so that you don't have to think about how long have I been doing this. And setting up a music track is just one of the best ways to do it. You know, select the songs that correspond to what our operation is. You know, if we want to do something that has to do with, you know, being very, very active, we might choose a very upbeat kind of song. If we're looking for to bring maybe more serenity into you know, a hectic life, maybe we would choose something much more peaceful, something that would correspond to the emotional state that we are attempting to create, right? Or that our manifestation corresponds with. Basically, the way that we'll feel when it happens, right? Okay, cool. So not everybody uses music, but it's a great one, right? And I have some stuff prepared today for when we'll do ours. Okay, cool. So so that's it. So now we're prepped, and then also I guess another thing to just think about as far as prepping the candle. I inscribed a sigil in the candle for today's working. However, I thought long and hard about this, and I decided that it is probably not in anyone's best interest for me to tell you what the sigil means. So I know what it means, and I'm not going to tell you, because that will just be better. And you will, and I know this crowd, and when it manifests, you will thank me. But until then, we're just not going to talk about it. We're going to try to set it and forget it. But if at any point you want to double down on this, because I do feel that this is a good work. I do feel that it is a good work. And I will give you a hint that it relates to the idea of how society would change for the better if certain truths that were kept from us were suddenly released. Truths that I think people in this group might think about on a regular basis. Okay? That's all I'll say. But if you decide either again or down the line, or you're like, that sounds really good, I want to double down on the operation that these guys at the Theosophical Society did today, here's the sigil, and I'll show you how to make it, right? So I try to make this, again, I typically make really, really complicated sigils because I make a lot of them, and this one revealed itself to me so simply, I was like, it's got to be that, right? Simple, right? So, there you go. Anytime we want to use that, we can use all the help we can get. Okay, cool. So, but the time has come for us. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So that's the sigil that is associated with this spell.
That's the one I have carved into this candle. Additionally, I have also dressed this candle. One of the things you can do, again, just doubling down on correspondences whenever possible. I dressed it with, you know, sacred oil. There are all kinds of different oils that you can get at, you know, your local occult shop or what have you. But this one's fast luck, because we could use some fast luck to make this happen. So, but again, and we talked about this previous class, and there's other stuff, schools of thought on candle magic, but essentially because I'm trying to draw something to us, in essence, I dress the top, bottom, right, top to down, because we're bringing it in, as opposed to, if we were banishing, for instance, we'd go bottom up, or middle to ends. There's different schools of thought. Oh, I think, yeah, I'll redraw it. Can't hurt, right? Cool. Cool. Okay, so now we know what we're doing. We've prepared our candle, we've prepared our space, we've prepared ourselves, right? So what do we actually do? Right? This is what do we do, right? So I've sourced from a bunch of different people, and this is just how I do it. This is not the right or the wrong or whatever way, but to me this feels like it checks all the boxes, and I like checking all the boxes. To begin with, there's your opening ceremony, whatever that looks like, depending on doing solo work, group work, whatever. But you would open the temple, and that might start with sort of a smudging sort of ceremony where you could move about with burning sage, that kind of thing. You would light candles if you had candles prepared. Not the operational candle, right? Just the, you know, just for ambiance or whatever you want, or again, just to make that gateway. This would also be maybe we would light some incense to, you know, create the mood, set the tone. And again, incense, all the scents, they all have correspondences, and again, we just want to stack them, right? We want it to tie to whatever the operation we're doing. So again, the incense I brought today is good luck. I brought good luck incense, so again, it's just stacking on top of what we were already doing, right? Some people will do will ring a chime to open the temple. That works. That's cool. I've seen that done. The Thelemites, for instance, will use the very common, greeting, "Do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law," to which others would respond, "Love is the law, love under will." That sort of way is a good way to open and close your temple too, especially if you're with a bunch of Thelemites. But there's no right or wrong way to do it. Just what feels right for you. That's the right answer. What feels right for you is the right answer. There's no right or wrong way to do this. There's just examples that we can take from. And I've collected some, and I've written some more, so you guys can use what I've done. So that's cool. So anyway, so I have here two examples of sort of an opening phrase that you could use. And in theory, there's nothing to say that you can't use both, or shouldn't use both, or whatever. So a good one is, "I cast this circle in the name of the Most High, the Tetragrammaton, whom we all serve, as a space between the worlds where all things are made possible through thine and my will. As above, so below, as within, so without, so mote it be." And then this one's one of mine. "Abrahadabra, I have spoken and declare this temple duly open. Let us pierce the veil, and for a time we leave the mortal world behind." This is just a poetic way of talking about calling down our astral temples, right? We talked about this in previous classes, right? Crushing the worlds together. That it's all one, right? And we are resonating vibrationally with higher realms. We're pulling them down into this realm, or maybe we're raising ourselves up. However you want to visualize it, but essentially we are taking our place as the divine authority that is within us, the magician who the world obeys with the right correspondences and that sort of thing. But that is essentially what we are establishing. We are opening our temple. We are calling our astral temple down. And then the time comes to protect ourselves. And this goes way, way back, lots of different magical traditions. They all teach this ritual. And I know we talked about it before. I'm just going to touch on it briefly. The lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. No matter what you do before or since, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you practice this and make it your own. There's all kinds of different ways and versions of the LBRP that you can learn and look at, and eventually you will just find the one that works for you. And the reasons that it works, the more you do it, the more time you spend thinking about it, the more sense it will start to make to you. And effectively, the only thing that I would say about the LBRP is functionally, when we do magic, and specifically when we do something like LBRP, we are announcing ourselves on the astral plane. Essentially, we are lighting up on the astral because we are doing astral work. And visualization and energy direction and form and force and all that stuff, that lights up in a way that just normal walking around folks aren't going to light up. And it gets the attention of things that notice this kind of stuff. All kinds of things notice this kind of stuff. It's like ghosts, entities, elementals, who knows? Get attracted. Angels and demons, all that stuff get attracted by astral work, spirit work. And so the LBRP is designed to protect us. Basically, we are putting up our pentagrams at the 4 cardinal points, and we are assigning the archangels, the 4 archangels, to stand at those 4 cardinal points and protect us from anything untowards that would otherwise mess with us, right? Our operations, our true will, right? Anything that would be messing, or basically messing with that authority, that sovereignty, right? That kind of idea. The more you look into this, the more you'll see where the archangels show up as the guardians of the abyss, and once you understand that, then this part makes way much more sense. But I don't want to digress down that too far. But again, the thing I was trying to caution though is once you start doing LBRP, you should not stop. It should become a daily routine, preferably twice daily. Actually, I found that works better if you do it in the morning and in the evening or whatever. But the idea is that because you light up on the astral plane, you better keep your shields up. Because once you forget to keep your shields up, it doesn't stop you lighting up. And if your shields aren't up, then whatever's out there can target you, right? And that's where magicians who find that they were doing LBRP regularly and then stopped end up like really wishing they hadn't stopped. And I will attest to that. I will admit that there was a time when I wasn't doing it daily, and I regret not doing it daily. And now I do it twice daily again, and I feel a lot better. Okay, so anyway, but the LBRP is a very elaborate ritual, and I'll do it for you today when we do our work. But I was thinking about it, and I like simplicity too. Whenever we can take something complicated and make it simple. So I have a thing on your sheet that you might use. I was trying to think about. I made a correlation between the LBRP and the prayer that I was taught as a child. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John guard the bed where I lie on. Right? That idea. Basically, and I rewrote the LBRP as if it was a prayer or a nursery rhyme or something that a child could say before bed. Right? That would summarize and effectively do the same thing. So I do not want, and I never recommend shorthand or taking the shortcut or going the easy way when one, you haven't learned the hard way first, and two, you should just ask yourself why you want a shortcut in the first place. Are you trying to get out of doing work, and is that spiritual? Right? But regardless, sometimes I'm not in a position where I can just go do a big 10-minute long thing. So this is a good shorthand for me because I can still do the visualizations as I said. So, and you are welcome to do it, and ideally even teach it to those who might learn something from it. So, and I'll tell you also what it means. Yellow, red, blue, and green, ere the stars about me see. And again, those are the 4 pentagrams, 4 cardinal points. Yellow being in the east, corresponding to air. Fire being in the south, corresponding to or I said fire, right? Fire in the south, which is red, sorry. Blue in the west, which corresponds to blue, or corresponds to water, and then green in the north, which corresponds to earth. And then the next line, Uriel, Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, guard against all that would thwart my true will. And again, Uriel stands in the north, Gabriel stands in the west, Michael stands in the south, Raphael stands in the east. And if you can visualize that, then you have effectively done the LBRP. Now, you still want to give it as much energy and as much time as you can, and that's why I don't, again, recommend a shorthand, especially because even doing a shorthand, I can tell you every time, standing up and doing it physically always gives me at least better results, and probably gives you better results too. But then again, the one thing that I should point out, if you research LBRP, you will learn this anyway, but there's the Kabbalistic cross is essentially the short ritual that you do to start LBRP. So effectively, Kabbalistic cross is part of LBRP, but it can also be its own. And there's, I guess, essentially like two popular versions of it. There's the Hermetic one, which goes, basically you imagine standing in a column of light, pulling the light down to your third eye, and you will say Atho, which means thou, or thine. Malkut, you point to the floor and say Malkut, which is the 10th Sephirah, the kingdom, the earth we live in. For thine is the kingdom. Ve Gedula, Ve Gevura, for the kingdom, the power, and the glory. Le Olam. Amen. Right? Okay, that's the sort of Hebrew way to do it. Crowley also had a version where he said Soy Ophele Iskiros Eucharistos, which is another way to do it. Just another way to imagine where it is that you stand in the column of light and the cross, because we are all on the cross of matter, that we are nailed, squirming to, our spirit is nailed, squirming to the cross of matter. That's another of those correspondences that we might start to understand. But, and I actually have a variation. I like to add an additional step to the Kabbalistic cross that I call the Kabbalistic Ankh, because I will intone my magical name, and I will touch from my heart to my heart, and I will loop through the crown chakra and back to the heart again, because that's all about attachment release, right? Okay, so and then where did we leave off? Oh, then and then actually Crowley is the one I think he's the one who popularized using the Greek exorcism, I guess we might call it, apopantos kakadaimenos, which essentially means away evil spirits far from here, right? Which is just a banishment, right? When we're like, get away, like anything that would mess with us, away evil spirits far from here. And apopantos kakadaimenos is a quick shorthand that a lot of people use. If you wish, once you've done LBRP and you have put your shields up, then any other additional rituals that you would want to do before you did your spell work, this is where you would do them. And so, for instance, there are variations of the pentagram ritual that you can consider, including the lesser invoking ritual of the pentagram, which is great. There's also the banishing and invoking rituals of the hexagram, which deals more with the planetary stuff as opposed to the elemental stuff. We're not going to get into all that here, but maybe the other one that I would probably recommend would be the middle pillar, which actually Kabbalistic cross is kind of a variation of it. And I'm not going to do middle pillar or explain it right here. I have a variation too. I've added extra points and whatever. Israel regarding only had like 4, and I found the other ones and added them. But that's essentially what you're doing is you are visualizing, calling the column of light down to activate your chakras one at a time until they are all active and your body of light is now infused. And you have energy to spare, right? And that gives you, that one, just being like synced into that circuit, gives you the unlimited energy of the astral light, but also is when it comes to actually charging, you are imparting energy. You're taking energy out and putting it into something. It's good to have some reserve. So middle pillar is a great way to make sure that I was all charged up when I charged that item, right? But I have an elaborate version of the lesser invoking ritual of the pentagram, which I won't perform, or I won't go over right now. You can read about this on my website if you like, because I feel like we should probably be moving on. So anyway, and then of course any offerings that you would want to make to the spirits before you actually did the spell, this would be the time to do that. And you can even formalize it with something like, in gratitude, we make this offering to any and all entities present or who may be further called by this working. Assuming, for instance, we were using incense, we would say, this incense is of a scent we believe to be pleasing to you, that you will lend favorable aid to the great work we set about. Basically, you know, give a little, get a little, whatever. This is our gratitude for you guys showing up and participating in the ritual that we are doing. And in theory, some people may have entities, whatever, may have just shown up to watch, right? In theory, that's just cool. Like, we got their attention because we lit up on the astral plane. And the more of us who do work, the brighter it's going to be, right? Right? Cool. Okay, so, but now we've done that. We've done all the actual offerings, and now it's actual time to do the magic, the actual charging. And I know we talked about this in previous classes, but just again, to reiterate, what we are essentially attempting to do is we are harnessing the powers of our visualization. Because it is the astral realm, it is the mental realms that shape ours, not the other way around. And so when we are in control of what it is that we have applied form to. And form is essentially anything that falls on the thought spectrum, right? Thought, air, visualization is all like the form of it. The force of it is from the other tree. So if that's the left tree or the severity tree or pillar, then we're on the mercy pillar is where we're getting our emotional stuff, our emotional resonance, and that's where we want to. Where we give the form, where we impart the force into the form, and essentially we bring it to life. This is the thought form element of it, and that's a whole other thing. And that would be the step even above like amulets and talismans and stuff. That would actually be creating servitors, which I am not going to talk about today. We're not going to talk about that stuff today. But essentially, what we are doing is we want to visualize form and force of what we want to come about, the visualization of what we want to come about, as if it is happening in the moment, as if it is happening to us right now. And while there's all different kinds of emotions we might be feeling, gratitude is a great one, because we will definitely feel gratitude when it manifests, right? And that is probably how we should be feeling anyway when the universe gives us an awesome gift like manifestation. Right? So essentially what we are imagining, what we're visualizing then is this outcome. We would even imagine it, I tend to use my third eye because that just works for me. But I imagine that image actually coming out of my third eye and going into the object and basically taking root there, and then the more energy I put into it, essentially the heavier the object would become. Now, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, if I put it on a scale, it would be heavier. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that, like, there are times, particularly, like, people who are sensitive, they can pick up an object and be like, that's heavier than it should be, right? That feels heavier than it should be, especially like a crystal. When it's been charged for a while and it feels, it's like, or when you have a piece of organite that's been absorbing negative energy all day and now it's really super heavy, all kinds of stuff like that, right? But essentially what we're doing is we want to charge the object that we are, in our case, a candle, that our intention is to destroy it, ultimately creating that vacuum. But the more we can put in, the more we're getting out. So how long do you do it for? At least 10 minutes, right? Probably at least 10 minutes. 10 to 20 is probably sufficient. But there's no rule to this. Like, you should know. And there are all kinds of ways, and I'm sure it varies from magician to magician, but you'll get clues that your work is done. Oftentimes, you will get hallucinations that may start to happen. You may see lights and sparkles, or you might see a halo or an aura around the object that you're charging. Maybe the sigil, if you're doing either the sigil on the candle or an actual sigil on a piece of paper, may start to morph or change, or maybe even appear like it's three-dimensional, or fade in, fade out, all kinds of weird hypnagogic things that may happen to you in the process of you focusing your intention into the object, right? But if you get a result like that, that's a good indication that it's at least started, if not done. It's at least magically charged to some extent. And in theory, the more you can give it, the better result you're going to have. If you can give it another 10 minutes, why not? Why not, right? You did all this other stuff. We spent at least a half an hour just talking about getting ready, let alone what it actually takes to put a spell together. If you can give it another 15 minutes, half an hour, great, go for it. Especially if you can hold your focus that long, because that's really the key. But sooner or later, there are. There are ways to, again, there are all different kinds of ways that you can do this. It's certainly acceptable, quote unquote, to sit there quietly and just do the visualizations. And as long as your emotions are resonating, then you don't need to do anything else. You can essentially just sit there. But in theory, the more you do, or the more authentic you can get your emotions to be, the better your results are going to be. So, like, for instance, if we were talking about, like something like that would have to do with, I don't know, like a delivery. You wanted a delivery more quickly, right? Well, maybe you would put on some really fast-paced music, and you would run around your room and bouncing off the walls and getting really excited and putting that energy into the object that you're charging. Does that make sense? You want it, of course, to correspond with the operation that you're doing. If we want something peaceful, bouncing around the room doesn't make any sense at all, right? So there's all different ways to do it. Is there a right or a wrong way? I don't know. It's more just like what makes the most sense to you at the time, and your intuition leads you towards all kinds of stuff that you should listen to, especially when it, like when you just know, then you should follow that stuff. And when it's hard, that's usually a good indication that it'll pay off, right, in one way or another. But again, there are other ways that you can get this energy up, we could, certainly people trance out in all kinds of different ways. But some people will speak in tongues, which is effective in the sense that speaking in tongues, which all kinds of traditions do that kind of stuff, right? And essentially what they're doing is they're making babbling nonsense words to get their conscious mind out of the way. Conscious mind isn't making those words, and they're letting their unconscious, subconscious mind come through, speak through them. And while the words make no sense, the emotions we can follow, right? And so that's a really, really good way of if you're comfortable doing that, as a way to just add on to that sort of thing. Additionally, some people will do a dance or read some poetry, or whatever, some kind of way to get that energy up and also make it sort of an offering to the spirit for your operation. But again, we essentially you just follow your clues, and if you're holding the object and it feels heavy, then maybe it's time. If you see the sparkles or the other kinds of hallucinations, maybe it's time. Maybe you just wait until your playlist is done, which is probably just as good. Especially if you made a 10 or 20 minute playlist, that's probably enough. Probably enough. I don't want to say yes or no because every situation is going to vary. But if, for instance, you need some poetry, I wrote a little thing that basically describes the actual act of charging. So it's, I don't know, so you are free to use it if it would work for you. So like, for example, know we true that all creation, all spirit, form, and deviation, from imagination to manifestation, and each variation of that permutation, above, below, have correlation. Our concentration is activation, communication of transformation across the cosmic civilization. This is the foundation of our operation. For all that is but vibration. And if you want to close, then this is now our comprehension that matter is energy's last extension, vibrating far too slow to mention, but all the same neath Saturn's tension. Still, some forms boast of more retention to hold a suspension of our attention, and empowered a vehicle for its ascension, in accordance with laws of magical convention, to the astral realm shaping our dimension, and fill the void of our truest intention. Cool. All right, and then you are done. Once you have charged the object, and you have, and you feel that it is, you put into it everything that you have chosen to put into it, then it's time to relax and do the opposite. If it's a candle, you would light it and let it burn down. If it's a sigil, you might want to relax a little bit, and then when you feel relaxed, throw it into the flame so it's destroyed in that moment. The effectiveness of destroying a sigil immediately is the idea that if you are in trance when you are looking at it, and you weren't expecting it to suddenly be destroyed. So like, for instance, some people like, I think it's really cool to take a piece of flash paper, which we've done in the past, we've taken flash paper, like that a magician would use, like a stage magician would use, and basically put like a match on it or something that will slowly burn, and then when it touches, it'll burn, it'll explode in an instant, and you weren't expecting it. Those moments of interruption between the conscious and unconscious mind are where we achieve our moments of gnosis, and effectively where the message of that sigil will most accurately be communicated to the higher self in those moments of gnosis, where the conscious and the unconscious come together. Yeah? Okay. But, so that's the idea, is that you would relax, light the candle, destroy the sigil, trance out again, but in this case you want to let it go. We're relaxing now. We're not charging it. We're releasing ourselves from the attachment to that result, right? And basically just imagine, you can trance out even looking directly in the flame, that's a good way, or you can just imagine all of what's left being sucked into the flame, going into the flame, and then the idea is that as the candle is burning up, the energy that was put in it is being released and is going where it needs to go, right, to complete the circuit that we have started, right, of which we are just one catalyst, yeah? Once we are done and we've released, what I will say, once you have set the purpose of a candle to be burned in offering, it should be burnt all the way. It should be burned until it burns itself out. And you can't always do that all the time, right? Because some candles take hours to burn down. So it is okay, for instance, once your ritual is done, to blow out a candle and relight it later, like down the line. Like for instance, obviously, this won't burn down today, so I'll take it home and I'll finish it off in my temple space, right, or whatever. But the idea is you don't want to wait around either. You want that released and gone, right? So you want it burned down as quickly as possible, but you also don't want to leave a candle unattended, right? Especially a magically charged candle, because you're never going to get a weirder fire hazards and stuff than a magically charged candle. Right? All kinds of weird stuff will happen, and can happen. So, okay. But regardless, now that we're done, we want to close our temple. Right? We opened, we did our magic, now we want to close. We want to finish as we started. And probably the first thing that I would recommend that we do, and this is not traditional, so to speak, but effectively, it has come to my attention, our attention, friends of ours and what have you, that the astral light that gets called down when we do magical work, the astral plane that we light up on as we do this kind of stuff, attracts attention. Especially in a world so chock full of ghosts and spirits and lost souls as our modern world seems to be. And so it is unsurprising at all that any and all ritual that you might do might attract some attention. Right? So, we want to give anything that was drawn by our working, or even if it was just curiosity, license to depart. Right? And so there are different schools of thought towards this, some traditional and some not. But I would say that the first thing to do is any ghosts, spirits, lost souls that might have been drawn by your working, they didn't come to help you with your magic. And that is not what they are there for. They are, if they have any energy at all, they are running on fumes. That's why they're ghosts in the first place. And so they are not there to help you manifest your stuff. That's what your higher self is there for. If anything, they're there for your help. And so one of the things that we have started to work into our rituals is we will say, I will use Crowley's Collect from the End. Collect for the End from Liber 15, which is basically the Gnostic Mass, which I think is very, very beautiful and summarizes very much the sentiment that we want to deliver to anything that might have been attracted our way. So, for instance, unto them from whose eyes the veil of life hath fallen, may there be granted the accomplishment of their true wills, whether they will absorption in the infinite, or to be united with their chosen and preferred, or to be in contemplation, or to be at peace, or to achieve the labor and heroism of incarnation on this planet or another, or in any star, or aught else. Unto them may there be granted the accomplishment of their will, yea, the accomplishment of their will. And then I would say the variation of Amen, the Om, as I will visualize my middle pillar going nuts, just as a beacon, almost like an elevator, right? Anybody who touches my light, you get sucked up. That's just what happens, man. You get near, that's what happens. And anybody who wants a ride, they can have one. And then when it's all done, because this isn't me, I will say one quick, unpoetic prayer to Michael. I'll say, Saint Michael, please guide them home and unite them with their higher selves. Amen. That's because that is a karmic cycle to which I do not pretend to understand, but it does seem to be a karmic good that our time and place seems to be in need of. We need more light workers doing this kind of stuff, and so I would just say, since you're doing this work anyway, you may as well, do this and acknowledge that there are, lost souls about us who do need the light, and if we can help them, we should. And we can. It's in our power to do so. Very much so, especially because we're essentially doing this stuff anyway when we're doing our own work.